journey towards Barati. With so many people on board this time around, the crew would soon run out of food, which would make Luffy realize that he needs to recruit a cook as soon as possible. However, their new cook might not be who you think. You see, in the original story, before asking Sanji to join the crew, Luffy actually asked Zeph first. Although Zeph originally refused the invitation, this time around, Luffy would give his all in order to convince him. Eventually, the Krieg pirates would attack Barati, but with Ace and Sabo on board, they would get destroyed well before Mihawk even arrives. During this battle, Zeph would feel nostalgic for his own pirating days and would rethink Luffy's offer to join the crew. Mihawk would soon arrive on Barati, confused to see that the Krieg pirates had already been dealt with. This is when Zoro would jump in to directly challenge Mihawk. Although he would quickly lose, his resolve would amaze Zeph, who would officially accept Luffy's invitation to join the Straw Hats. And even though Luffy now has a new cook on board, it's still likely that he would invite Sanji as well so he could achieve his dream of finding the All Blue. With two of the best chefs in the East Blue on board, the crew would then head straight for Arlong Park. The first thing they'd do on land is witness the horrors inflicted upon the village by the fishmen. Since Zeph visited the Grand Line before, he would tell Luffy a bit of the fishmen history and how they actually have their own island on the Grand Line. Anyways, with so many strong fighters on board this time around, the crew would waste no time and would instantly invade Arlong Park. While Ace, Sabo, Zoro, and Sanji deal with the fishmen, Luffy would attack Arlong. And after a short battle, the Straw Hats would be victorious. Nami would then break down in tears and would agree to officially become the crew's navigator. After finishing up things in Arlong Park, the crew would head for Logtown. While on their way, all of the new crewmates would slowly start to get to know each other and would share some stories. Nothing especially interesting would happen during this arc. The crew would do some shopping up until Smoker starts chasing them around. Although the crew is far stronger now, they still don't know any hockey, so running from Smoker would be their only option. Dragon would soon appear to assist them, and using his wind powers, he would help them escape towards the reverse mountain. Since Zeph already knows how to scale the mountain, he'd take command of the ship and guide them through it. Reaching the other side, the crew would be greeted by a giant whale blocking their way. Same as in the original, they'd get eaten, and then they'd meet Crocus inside. From here, things would basically go the same way they did in the main story, up until the point Luffy tries to comfort Laboon. Since he loves animals, Gaimon would express his disapproval of Luffy's actions the whole time, till he sees Laboon tear up and accept the Straw Hats' promise. Meanwhile, I can see Sabo and Ace messing with Vivi and Mr. Nine and absolutely terrifying them. Acknowledging the strength of Luffy's crewmates, Vivi would come clean immediately, explaining the Alabasta situation and asking for their help. While Ace and Sabo carefully consider her request, Luffy would simply agree to help her, which would infuriate his brothers. Anyways, before the crew departs, Luffy would do another questionable thing. He would ask Crocus to join his crew. In the main story, Crocus obviously refused this request, but in this version, he'll have to accept, meaning that the crew would get a new doctor. Also, Crocus would probably sense a similar energy to Roger's coming from Luffy and would want to help the boy achieve his dream of becoming the Pirate King. Now, with a ship filled to the brim with all sorts of characters, the Straw Hats would quickly make their way to Whiskey Peak. On the way, Zoro would bond with some of the older members of the crew like Zeph and Crocus, and they would enjoy drinking together. Meanwhile, Saba would try to talk to Vivi and would start bonding with her, sensing that she's a good person who's concerned for her people's safety. Before they reach the shore, Vivi would inform the crew that the island is full of bounty hunters who would try to kill them. This would pique Zoro and Ace's interest, and they'll compete to see which one of them can defeat more of them. Sanji would obviously join the fun too. After making short work of all the bounty hunters on the island, Vivi and Igaram would meet up in order to discuss what they intend to do next. Soon, the crew would arrive on Little Garden. Sensing that it's an abandoned island, Gaimon would be the first person to jump off in order to experience the local wildlife. Saba would volunteer to run after him in order to keep him safe, while Crocus would prefer to lay back and lounge on the lawn chair he brought along with him. While everyone else goes onto the island to gather supplies, Ace would stay behind in order to talk to Crocus about his father, as he would be interested in knowing more about him. Most of Little Garden would go exactly the same as the main story. The only thing that would change is that the crew would defeat their enemies much easier this time around with Sabo and Zeph's help. Back on the ship, the crew would continue their journey to Alabasta, and Nami would fall sick. Now, despite having a doctor on board already, I don't really think Crocus would be able to cure her. You see, Crocus was only a doctor for around 3 years on Roger's ship, so he isn't that experienced. And considering that Nami's disease was very rare, it's unlikely he would know how to cure it. So the crew would need to go to the Drum Island all the same. After blasting through Wapol's forces, Luffy, Sanji, Usopp, and Nami would head straight for the abandoned castle. Meanwhile, Ace, Sabo, and Vivi would take a ride to the top of the mountain on Dalton's sled. Zoro and Gaimon would stick together in order to explore the island and would inevitably get lost. Once Luffy and Nami arrive at the castle, things would go mostly the same as in the main story, with Wapol making his return. Zoro would then greet Wapol and his soldiers outside the castle and prepare to slice them down with Chopper's help. So at this point in the main story, Chopper left Dr. Kureha in order to join Luffy's crew. However, this time, he wouldn't have to do that because Kureha would come on board with him. In case you don't remember, Luffy actually asked her to join way before he asked Chopper. So I guess Straw Hats would now have a total of 3 doctors on the ship. Setting sail with 2 new crew members, the Straw Hats would quickly realize that Going Merry is way too small for all these people and would start thinking about switching ships. On their way to Alabasta, Kureha would probably tease Crocus about being a bad doctor, as he couldn't even help Nami, but the two would eventually become good friends and would talk about medicine together. Anyways, the crew would soon arrive on Alabasta Shore, where all crew members would split up to do their own thing. Slowly, each crewmate would realize on their own how Crocodile's actions impacted the citizens of Alabasta and would all agree that he needs to be stopped as soon as possible. Considering that this time around the crew has some senior members, I believe that they wouldn't fall for that dumb trap Crocodile set up for them in the original story. However, they still can't defeat Crocodile without Haki, right? Well, that's not really true. You see, I believe that before they engage in a fight with Crocodile, Crocus would tell Luffy about his Sand Devil fruit and how it works. He would then tell him that they could probably counter his powers with some kind of liquid, most likely water. Remember, Crocus was on Pirate King's ship, so he must have encountered a lot of Logia users and would know exactly how their powers work. Anyways, now equipped with water, the entire crew would absolutely overwhelm Crocodile. Inevitably, Luffy would send Crocodile flying and recruit Robin soon after that. Eventually, all of the Straw Hats would be invited to rest up and party at the royal castle. After the celebration, Vivi would surprise the crew with a new, larger ship, since the Going Merry was getting too small for all of them. Usopp wouldn't be too happy about this, but Cobra would reassure him that he would take extra good care of their old ship. However, gifting the Straw Hats a ship isn't the only thing Vivi would do, because soon after, she would announce that she would be joining Luffy's